And it's like one and so then I was the other guy who had that because he's like, I'm not doing I did like I two and one. Which one is like I still I don't know him. He's like a really bad talent. I started asking him this. I was they might be complicated, but I was gonna say yeah, so near our mom. That's the one who I'm interested in the novel, though we need to know more about what you want to say. Right, whereas for the other guy, the last guy, I'm in I love to be part of this. My favorite is normally I try to find it with it. Okay, let's go with this guy. Did someone, you didn't respond to this other guy, right? I didn't respond to it. So I might say like, oh, I heard back from someone I just. Yeah. Yeah, so it's part of it. No, but I think that was the thing. After hosting the house, about your day back in here. Thanks for coming. Thank you. I'll be sitting up here like you. Oh, you'll be okay. Because the right thing to do is to do it first guy. They don't really like that. Because I wrote first. Is a good problem to have. Yeah. It is a good problem to have, but I'm worried that I don't understand. You know, I would say right.
All right. I think we are ready. Thank you all so much for being here. Welcome. My name is Marianne, and I'm the store manager here at City Bookshop, an independent, community-minded, and woman-owned bookstore. We are so excited to welcome Tania Malik this evening for a discussion of her newest novel, Hope You Are Satisfied. I want to thank you all so much for joining us tonight, both in person and online. If you enjoy tonight's event, you may also enjoy our event next Wednesday with Yannicka Oza discussing A History of Burning, or one of our literary fiction book clubs. You can check our website for more of those details. Before we get started and I introduce our authors, some quick housekeeping notes. Please take a moment to silence your cell phones if you have them. If you need a restroom tonight, they're located upstairs past the cash register. More importantly, if you need to purchase a copy of tonight's book, you can purchase one at the register. And we'll have a Q&A following the discussion, which you can participate in by raising your hand in person or putting a question in the Q&A box on Zoom. And once the Q&A here is finished, we'll rearrange the space and we'll have a quick signing. Now on to the reason that we are here. Tania Malik is the author of the novel 3 Bargains that received a Publishers Weekly and Booklist starred review. She was educated in boarding schools in the foothills of the Himalayas and has had a varied career in the travel and nonprofit fields. She was raised in India, Africa, and the Middle East, and currently lives in San Francisco's Bay Area. Tania James is the author of 3 works of fiction, most recently the novel The Tusk That Did the Damage. Tusk was named a Best Book of 2015 by the San Francisco Chronicle, The Guardian, and NPR, and shortlisted for the International Dylan Thomas Prize. Her short stories have appeared in One Story, The New Yorker, Granta, Freeman's Anthology, Oxford American, and other venues. James is an associate professor at George Mason University and lives in Washington, D.C. Her forthcoming novel, Loot, will be published by Knopf in June 2023. So without further ado, please join me in giving a warm welcome to everyone here tonight.
This is unprofessional.
Hello. We did.
I know we did.
We planned it. Hello. Does this work? No. Is it? Hello. I'm trying to. Okay, I think, hello? Does this work? Oh, sorry. Okay. Okay, well, I am so happy to be here with Tania Malik, author of this amazing book, Hope You Are Satisfied. Welcome, everyone. I would love to spend some time talking to you about how you feel about the spelling of your name and the lifelong conflict you may have felt between the letters I and Y.
Oh, yeah.
But I think probably we'll talk about that afterwards and instead start with the novel. I thought we could start with the way in which this is a novel of a city.
Mhm.
And I found it really fascinating that you're depicting Dubai before it's the sort of glamorous Dubai that we know now, and like, you know, the home of the world's tallest skyscraper and this
Right.
glamorous place. And so I was wondering about the challenges of writing a city, and you know what you found difficult about it, or and also what you found kind of thrilling about it.
Right. Okay. Well, thank you so much. Thank you to eCity for having me here. Thank you, Tania, for joining me. I haven't been in DC for many, many years, so this is very fun for me. Dubai, but the Dubai I knew was 1990 Dubai. It wasn't this Uber Las Vegas that we all know today. It was a like scrappy little city filled with guest workers from all over the world. And when I thought about setting the novel there, it wasn't like I could do any research. I couldn't go and visit that place. It doesn't exist anymore. When I did go there a few years ago, everything has changed. No landmark is the same. No street is the same. So it's not like I could walk down the street and remember anything. In fact, my office used to be on this long road, and we were on the 22nd floor, and it was desert all around it. And when I was there a few years ago, I was trying to find it, and it was lost amongst these towering edifices that had grown there. It was like a little Lego piece, there. It took me ages to find it. So it wasn't the city that I could research. It was also a time 1990, so it's not like there were many artifacts from that era. It's just too recent. So I think a lot I had to excavate from memory. I had to go back because of the time I spent there and kind of remember my time there just to bring the city back to life. Yeah.
I have a goldfish memory, so I can't remember what I had for breakfast. But so I'm just amazed that you could remember what you could do in terms of building a city out of memory and imagination. Like, what were there some strategies you used to kind of locate yourself? I mean, I'm specifically thinking of some really excellent descriptions of food, and that felt to me like you were just like those were just immediate access points for you.
Right. Absolutely. The food was very much so. I was just talking to someone today, and we were talking about the Lebanese food that what did I say? I loved kanafa. Yeah. But there were these certain tastes, like the Egyptian food, kosheri, that I used to have at this friend's place that are so, like, how you never can capture that taste, even any restaurant you go to or anywhere. It's just that taste is like burned in your memory. And and so I definitely use those as like little, like little doors to go back into remembering what it was, and also to be in my 20s. I think that was really fun to remember. Like, it was such a defining age for me, such a coming of age time. And I was surrounded with all these characters that I kind of based my characters on, these guest workers. Yeah.
I would love to hear more about the choice of centering characters who are guest workers, because I don't think I've read a novel that's set in the Middle East that is focusing on a very different type of immigrant than what I'm used to. Like, usually the pattern of migration is point A to point B.
Yes.
Sometimes point A to point B back to point A, but this is something really different. Can you talk about that?
Sure. So yeah, Dubai is all very much a melting pot of cultures and countries. It was very popular with Western tourists, but there was also all these guest workers that came from Asia and Africa, and they were very young, and they had this great responsibility. They used to often like support families back home. But many of them were kind of in a double bind because they were supporting families back home, but they didn't want to go back home. They kind of got used to the air conditioning and the clean roads and the clean, the abundant grocery stores and this kind of lifestyle. And so they wanted what they wanted for themselves didn't reconcile with what they were doing for their families. But a lot of these guest workers, you would come from all different places, and it was very much we're all in this together kind of feeling. No one had their back. They were basically, they just left home. They kind of still were in that, they had that kind of unfounded sense of invincibility, but yet they were supporting all these people back home, which was this great sense of responsibility. And they still like to have fun because the first time they were living away from home and being independent. And and then set in Dubai, where there's all these rules and regulations that are very easy to flout and get into trouble with. But yeah, they're just so, I just thought they were just so interesting. And I used to look at them and, I wasn't the same, but they were also, because they were sponsored by their company. They, to work there, your visa is sponsored by your company. And so you're very much beholden to the company. And there are a lot of indignities and humiliations kind of tied into that. And so they had all these different, they were the swirl of all these different elements that were happening for these young kids who were in their 20s. Yeah.
Yeah, there's this recurring image in the novel where this one character, their boss, Simon, has this safe and he keeps all their passports in this safe. And it's so, yeah, like indignity is what the word that comes to mind.
Right.
But that their freedom, they have so much freedom in one way to party and all this stuff and have a sex life that they might not have had,
Absolutely.
back in the homeland. But on the other hand, they really aren't free.
They're not free.
Yeah.
And, we hear a lot about the blue collar workers, in the FIFA World Cup. We heard about all these laborers who were brought in and they built these arenas almost overnight. But there are these low level white collar workers as well. And in many ways, they are indentured in that same way, even though they may be educated and they may be working in these office jobs. But in a way, they can't go against what they'll do almost whatever the company says, because they can't jeopardize their jobs or their families are depending on them. Yeah.
I mean, I think one of the things I found really moving about it was the way in which guest workers are not allowed to call this place home. And they are purely there for their labor. And I have relatives who work in different places in the Middle East, and I'd never thought about the poignancy of that, to give so much of your sweat and your tears and your investment to this place that you will never be allowed to stay. And I thought that gave this is such a funny novel, and that gave it this gravitas. Like, I kept thinking of White Lotus season 1, but which I love that show. So
yes,
that was
someone described
awesome.
This White Lotus in war.
Yeah. Okay, we'll get to that, because that is definitely a cool choice. But I also just felt like it had this added layer of gravity because of this situation.
Absolutely. So there is no path to citizenship in the Middle East, in many of the countries to Middle East. You come, you work, you leave. But these 20-somethings, where they're in that time where they feel everything so intensely, they're having intense relationships, romantic or otherwise, and they're making these great friendships, and yet their time there is finite. They have to leave. They can't stay there. And it always wonders, what does that do to your psyche, really? You're investing all this effort in these relationships with people in the place. You're kind of coming of age there, and yet you cannot make that home. And and for many of them, because of that, they wanted to come to the US or to Canada. And it's kind of like this pre-immigration thought, like, where can we go? And wherever they were going, they were not going to be with these people who they had this tremendous connection with. Yeah.
The novel takes place in the 6 months before the first Gulf War.
Right.
I hadn't, I don't think I've seen fiction kind of tackled that particular period of time, especially so close to the invasion, like geographically. And so I was wondering, like, did you always have that time period in mind? Because it's an amazing kind of pressure cooker to put these characters in as they're, trying to navigate complex, work situations, but then also on top of it, there's this big threat.
I always wanted to set it in the first 6 months leading up to the Gulf War, which was Operation Desert Shield, because the war itself was over in a month. It was over and done with. But those 6 months were really a daunting time. No one knew what was going to happen. Saddam Hussein had invaded Kuwait, and then he was refusing to leave. but he wasn't doing anything either. He kept saying, I'm going to have the mother of all battles. I have Scud missiles. We knew he had biological weapons, but yet he just kept sitting there. And that kind of tension, it was like the scream in the background continuously, to be living at that time. And then everyone had to just get on with their lives. We had to go to work and, buy groceries. During the pandemic, this huge thing was happening, and yet we still had to continue with our daily lives. And I was seeing Andrei Kurkov. I think he wrote this novel, Diary of an Invasion, about Ukraine. And he said, Russia started bombing us, but we still had coronavirus. So it was still they were still thinking about 6 feet apart in masks. And this was happening. And so there is something about the absurdity of that time. I mean, of war, or coming to a war. And these 6 months really, kind of involved all of that at that time. Yeah.
I was trying to find this place, but in the end, there's a kind of amazing detail where Rhea, the protagonist, goes outside and just looks at the sky, waiting for a bird to fall from the sky, because that's the sign that chemical warfare is being used.
Yes, because when they drop biological weapons,
yes,
the birds are the first to fall from the sky. Yeah.
So she just, it just is sort of benignly kind of it just sort of plainly said, and then you move on, and then she goes and does something else. So I just thought was so haunting. Can we talk about humor? Because I feel like one of the pleasures of this novel is the way it's sort of this voice, which is the first person narration of Rhea, is sort of navigating this world for us. And I just really was delighted by and charmed by her voice. And so when did that voice come to you? Did you play with other kind of perspectives? Because there are a myriad wonderful characters, but you focus on her.
The voice actually did come to me first right away. Also because I think there is kind of an absurdity to when humans decide to commit violence on one another. There's something very absurd about that. And I always, loved those kind of novels which kind of took dark humor. Like in War and Peace, this character Nikolai, I remember he's running from the French, the French are attacking him, and he's like, why are we all running? Are they attacking me? Are they going to kill me? Why would they kill me? Everyone loves me. It's like that kind of weird kind of, this humor that comes in at times of things, especially with war and that kind of thing. And I always loved that. And, it's such a all these dark elements are there, but I definitely think that, there's this kind of, what do they say? See the truth, but the slanted way. And I just think humor was a great way to bring that in. And I mean, I wanted Rhea to be this, she may not have been the most self-reflective person, but she is quite self-aware. And so I think, I just definitely wanted to have a character like that to negotiate this whole world that we live in. Yeah.
It seems in part survival tactic, like that. And it's interesting because she's intelligent enough to see the absurdity, whereas not everybody around her is, which is what makes me kind of attached to her. I also, so I know a lot of people who go and work at these places that there's so many different jobs you could have chosen. You choose this kind of, what's the word? I mean, they're not badly functioning, but they're kind of a, they're a tour guide company that's very, what's the word? Grassrootsy. I don't know. So somehow kind of not super professional.
Scrappy. Yeah.
That's the word, scrappy. So I was curious about why you chose a tour guide.
Because that's what I did briefly when I was in Dubai, that I worked for a small tour company. And it was just a fertile ground. I was like, these stories, someone needs to tell them. Oh, maybe me. Yes. Some of this, I always say all in here, nothing is true and nothing is untrue. I took situations and I've embellished them and all that. But it was just, these Western tourists would come in, and there's something about travelers and tourists when they come, they kind of loosen their inhibitions. They want to be someone else when they're on vacation. For a lot of us, they wanted to be our friend. I could never understand it. They would come and they'd drink, and then they'd want to impress us. And I don't know if they just felt they were having a party, and we were living in a party place, so we knew the best places to be or something. And it was just, these tourists were just so interesting that they would come to a Muslim country They would drink, they would do crazy things. I've had people having sex in public bathrooms, and I'm like, why did you come to Dubai if you want to have a sex in a public bathroom? Right? There's a whole world for you. So, you know. So, it was just all these amazing stories. And I just think that, I was just so familiar with that world of the tour operator and, vacationers coming to Dubai for fun. And you wouldn't think about it, but they would come there for this packaged exoticness of Arabia, the souks and all that. Yeah.
That's funny because I had sort of read the novel as a satire, but from what you're saying, it sounds actually quite realist
Uh,
of like this
oh, I'm glad
dynamics.
it made
and-
I'm glad you feel it's real. Yeah.
I mean, one of my questions was going to be, how you have this like insider knowledge of? Okay, so now you've already answered that.
Yeah.
Another thing that I thought was really interesting is the way you choose to foreground friendship. And there's my favorite character in the novel is named Freddie. He's from Zimbabwe.
Right.
And he just has Ria's back. And I really thought that Ria and Freddie were going to go down a romantic path. And it doesn't go in that direction. And I was interested in that choice, whether you thought about that and whether you had chosen to go in a different direction on purpose. I assume yes, but like why you're foregrounding friendship rather than romance.
It was just the nature of that place. With Freddie, and you're not the only one, every reader of mine said, why didn't they get together? I think everyone wanted them to get together. But I just felt in many ways it wasn't true to that place because none of them could be together. And also, I think they had that kind of, I don't want to say brother, but just kind of like he looked out for her. And if it went romantically, what would that have done to that special friendship they had? And to me, what I remember most about Dubai is the friends I had, the friendships we made, and how we had each other's back. And so it was very much a conscious choice. And I fought everyone on this, that it just didn't seem true to me that they would get together just because of the nature of the place, the nature of their relationship, and just how everyone just had to, like I said, had to leave at the end. And even if they did get together, what would that mean? And, I just wanted it to end on that uncertainty because, the war, it was uncertain with the war also. We all thought it was going to be World War III.
Right.
That's what everyone kept telling us.
Right. That made sense to me too.
Yeah.
And I love the way their relationship, we understand it better by the end.
Mm-hmm.
And it did make sense to me. She's so focused on her family and
the future.
Yes.
Yeah.
That she doesn't have that freedom to.
Yeah. She doesn't have the bandwidth.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, talking about uncertainty, the novel, the epilogue kind of jumps ahead.
Mm-hmm.
And it sort of, it tells us a lot about the start of the war. It switches from, I forget what the operation was called beforehand.
To Desert Storm.
To Desert Storm.
Yeah.
And so we're kind of left in that uncertain space. And I was wondering about your choice to end with that epilogue rather than staying close to Ria. It's still close to Ria, but it's giving us a kind of bird's eye view of the situation.
Yeah. I mean, I did want that to parallel with what her future would be, kind of uncertain, because when that war started, we thought that's it, that's the end for all of us. And then in a month, the US came in, they had the Patriot missiles and Iraq had collapsed and it was all over. But we didn't know that at that time. And so I really definitely wanted to keep that uncertainty in this kind of violent landscape still alive for her. Like what would happen to her? Will she go where she wants to go? Will she get what she wants? Will she even survive this? And I just thought that kind of tied in with that time. I always wanted to end it before the war started because the war in the end wasn't that important. Even though, it led down to the sequence of events that, the new wave of terrorism, all was because of this period of time. Osama bin Laden and, the first bombing of the World Trade Center, the embassies, USS Cole, the 9/11, then the second, it all came from this period. But many of us don't even remember this period that much. We don't even think about it. We think more of the second Gulf War. But I just, that period was so important, I think, in so many ways that I wanted to just concentrate on that and kind of leave Ria with this open-ended question. Yeah.
Yeah, I love the way the novel kind of has this sense of ongoingness, because we know that like history doesn't have any ending.
Yeah.
It's always something that's leading to the next thing. And we know from at least people like our age
Yeah.
can remember enough that the other things that you mentioned that this event leads to. And
Right.
so the novel leaves us in this, it felt really, attached to her and worried about her, even though I know how things will turn
Yeah.
out.
Yeah.
So I thought that was really wonderful to kind of end in that emotional note. I'm also, yeah.
No, go ahead.
I'm always curious about writing process, and
Uh-huh.
this is a novel that's so well plotted, like well paced and well plotted, and I am just curious about how you constructed that plot. Like, do you plan things ahead of time? Do you just let it all out in the first draft?
I'm very much, I will not stop. I'll write the whole first draft. I'll not go back. Even if I have to change things, big things at the beginning, I won't go back. I don't outline that much, but I do keep things in time. 3 things in mind, I would say. Time period, like when do I want to start and when do I want to end? Even if it's a whole life, I think it's important to just know when you want to start and end. And then I like to keep in mind, like, what is the narrative question what do you want the reader to be thinking as they're reading it? And I like to keep that in mind, but otherwise I don't do much beyond that. And I like to know where the main character will end, even if that's not the end of the book, because sometimes you have to wrap up and reflect. But I write the first draft without without any like going back. I just keep going. I try to keep going, because if I lose momentum, yeah.
Did you find your process different between the first novel and this second
Yes,
one?
very much so. I had a writing group for both novels. I have a little writing critique group. And the first novel, I would write something every month and produce it for them. But with this novel, I just found it didn't suit that kind of process. They had to read larger chunks rather than a chapter at a time to actually get the feeling of where I'm going and what has been laid out and what's going to happen. Otherwise, they had too many questions, like, why is she doing this and what is happening? And I'm like, just wait, it's coming, So yeah, it was definitely a very much different process. And I think I was a different writer too. You learn with each book. And so I was definitely I knew myself better the second time around. Yeah.
I'm so curious what you mean. Like, in what can you name in what way or specify? Or you?
Well, some things, I mean, I knew that because if I didn't write today, that wasn't the end of the world. I knew it'll come when I need it to come. I'm not a writer who writes every day. Just life doesn't allow it. And so I knew to be, easier on myself in that regard. I wish I wrote every day, because I feel then you keep it oiled, you keep the machine oiled, and then it's like when you stop going to the gym, it's so hard to get back into the gym, So yeah, so I wish, I wish I would, but I think that was one thing I did say, like, it'll come when it's time. You can get back to it. Yeah. Yeah.
I'm also wondering, just I love thinking about the different versions of a novel that are kind of in the closet, like the wrong paths taken, or was there anything in the drafting process where you were going down a certain path and then you realized something was, you learned something about the way you actually wanted it to be?
So it was all written in past tense, and then I was kind of stuck at something, and someone gave me the advice that he had learned from his MFA teacher, is that start with a clean piece of paper, like clean on your computer, and start transcribing what you've written with your manuscript next to you. And you'll be amazed at how it opens up for you and breaks open. So I started transcribing the whole manuscript fresh again. And I said, oh, this should be in present tense. So I changed it all into present tense. And then when I sold the book, the editor is like, this would be great in past tense. It increases the tension, and he kind of showed me, and so I went all the way back to past tense. Yeah. And I couldn't go to my old manuscript because I'd redone the whole thing in the process of writing it again and breaking it open. I had added and, changed things. And so I had to redo it all again
Yeah.
in past tense. So those are the three little,
Which is such a huge pain in the
I
butt
know, I know.
doing that.
Yeah.
Yeah, and yet it feels inevitable now that it's
Absolutely. Yeah. I can't even think of it in another way.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What else about the editing process? How is it working? What is your editing process like? Do you give this to friends? Do you give it to your agent?
Yeah.
Do you work a lot with your editor?
Yes. So I have a writing group, and they read it the first go. They read all my bad writing. And then after I'm really done with it, I have readers that read it at different stages. So then I'll do whatever this person says, and then I'll give it to this person. And so I have 2 or 3 readers who read it after that. They're not in the book business. They're just good editors, and they have a great eye, I think, and I trust them. So I think I was very fortunate to find these people and fortunate to have them as my friends. I swear I know some of them. Yeah. And we met in a writing group. So yeah, absolutely. So yeah, so I do have a writing group, and I need people to read my work and give me and let me know if what I'm really thinking is that getting translated on the page. Sometimes you think what you're saying is clear, but it's not. And so I do have a lot of readers still. And then editor, yes, he had some notes, like the past tense, and here and there he gave me some good suggestions, but mostly, yeah, he was quite happy with how it was. Yeah, yeah.
Oh, that's a relief.
Yeah. He
I'm-
did have one big thing, which I don't want to say because it's kind of a reveal at the end of the book. So that was his idea. Yeah.
You can tell me later.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah.
Because definitely don't want to spoil
Yeah.
spoil anything.
Yeah.
You just mentioned community. Community is so
Yeah.
important in the
Yes.
novel. And I know from reading interviews that you did not do an MFA, right?
I didn't do it.
So I'm curious as to how you've built community as a writer and what you've drawn from that, aside from, revision editor, fellow, peers editing your work.
I live in a place, fortunately, that has so many writers. I always say, you look left or right, you're going to see a writer in San Francisco. I was very fortunate about that, and I didn't have an MFA, so I went to author events, and I went to, I didn't do any classes, I didn't do any conferences. I just kind of went to author events and absorbed. And they would ask, craft questions sometimes, and that's how I kind of got into it. I joined a big writing group, and I met other writers who were starting out like me, then formed a smaller writing group. But community, I think, especially with writing, is so important. I love talking about writing. I love, breaking down books and all that. And so that to me is almost as important as actually writing the book. I love the community. But I think it was just MFA, I was just telling Jasmine, is I feel like, okay, that teaches you to write when you don't want to write. And it teaches you to take critique, and to get feedback in a way, and get thicken your skin a little bit. But otherwise, there's just so much to be learned by the books you read as well. Yeah.
Yeah. Speaking of, were there any books that you were kind of you were kind of trying to be in conversation with at all, or do you read while you're writing?
I do read a lot. I don't feel like, I know some authors feel a little like they'll get influenced or anything. I think I just get inspired. Yeah, I do read a lot. One book that I really love is an old one. It's called City of Thieves by David Benioff. And that's one of my favorite books that I love that book just because similarly, it's kind of set in this violent landscape. It's a siege of Leningrad. And these 2 guys are given, they're given one task is to find eggs for the commander's daughter's wedding. And so it's all this like comedy and, tragedy and violence and farce play across this like war-torn landscape. And it's just like kind of contained in that little book. And that's one of the books I always go back to.
That makes sense to me because his work has a lot of velocity, which yours does too, I think.
Yeah.
Are you holding the card? Okay.
Okay.
Maybe you could read for us?
Yes, absolutely. That would be great. Thank you. So, like I said, Ria is my main character, and she's very much a hustler. And the currency is the people she knows. She's not very book smart, but she knows these people. And another thing that changed with the war was that Americans, for the first time we had Americans in the area. There were not many Americans. And it kind of changed the feel of the place. All these American servicemen came in and they would come to Dubai for rest and recreation. And they were so young. They were also in their 20s. And they'd be walking around, not like kind of shell shocked. They'd been plopped into this Muslim country. You know, they were like in US like a day ago. And then suddenly they're in this Muslim country and they didn't know what to do with themselves. And there was a buddy system. So they'd be just walking around, sitting on park benches with each other and looking totally lost. But in this scene, Ria meets some of these American servicemen and she invites them to have juice with her, fruit juice. You want watermelon juice? I asked. Again, they looked unsure, but the shorter one made the decision for them. Sure, why not? I'm Jack, he said. This is Burke. Ria, I said, and we shook hands as they bent their head and repeated my name to make certain they were pronouncing it correctly. 2 more, I said to Mustafa at the juice stand. Salam alaikum, Mustafa said to the Americans. Wait, I got this, Jack said. He removed a folded piece of paper from the back pocket of his jeans. It was a trifold flyer or brochure, a cultural awareness primer. Jack scanned the paper and tentatively offered wa alaikum salam in response. Mustafa gave him a thumbs up, and we all laughed a little self-consciously. How long have you been here? I asked. Jack explained they were sailors with the US Navy and had arrived a few weeks ago. Allowed off their ship for a few hours, they were venturing away from the suggested places listed in their brochure. It also says here we should avoid talking to any of the local ladies, Burke pointed out. The penalty is 21 lashes, I said. They glanced at each other uneasily, so I let them off the hook. I'm safe, I said to them, but you must be careful. Grace joined us. Grace is her best friend, throwing me a wide-eyed look that encapsulated a few questions, chiefly, how did you manage to nab these two, and what are you up to? She wouldn't mind, so I invited Jack and Burke to accompany us. We had a few stops to make and would be meeting our office colleagues and friends, which in our case were one and the same, for drinks. Drinks? Do you mean alcoholic drinks or more fruit juice? Jack asked. No more fruit juice, I assured them, though I understood their confusion. The restriction on alcohol was probably issue number 1 in their cultural awareness handout. But Dubai had as many licensed bars and restaurants as any other place in the world, or it would be near impossible for us to sell the sun and sand vacations to the Europeans otherwise. It was just that the locals weren't allowed to partake. We wandered into the Bastakia district adjacent to the textile market. Children played in the unpaved lanes enclosed on either side by roughly hewn dun-colored walls that crumbled through in places like moth-eaten curtains. Actually, I'll take a little aside here. You know, we just had the coronation this past weekend. And, you know, we're talking about all these new buildings and this Dubai being built up with all these skyscrapers. So the Bastakia was this crumbling little neighborhood of old wind towers and merchant houses. And it was, at this time, was supposed to be demolished. And it so happened that Prince Charles was visiting Dubai, and there was a local British architect, and he arranged for Prince Charles to tour this neighborhood and kind of whispered in his ear that they're going to demolish this place and build a skyscraper. And he knew Prince Charles likes history and pomp and circumstance, as we saw. And Prince Charles then wrote to Sheikh Maktoum, and something to the effect of, a nation without a past is a nation without a future. And so they preserved that neighborhood. It's a thriving arts and cultural district. It has cafes and galleries and museums around its winding lanes, and it's like a lovely little place. But at that time, as this American serviceman says, looks like someone bombed the place, Burke said. And we assured him that the derelict masonry of the Bastakia was what remained of the city's fortifications from the late 19th century. Jack and Burke had never been this far away from home, we learn, and had been at their base in the United States when Saddam Hussein invaded Kuwait. We mobilized and headed right out, Burke said. Glimpses of the behemoth ships entering the Gulf laden with tanks, artillery, and various equipment had been appearing on the news. Between patrolling shipping lanes, upholding the embargo, and blocking everything but food and medicine from getting to Iraq and occupied Kuwait, their ships docked at the Dubai shipyard. We've been sitting around too long, Burke said. We need to get into the game. Burke has had it with training exercises, Jack said. It's all we do, Burke protested. Clearly, Burke wanted to get his hands on one of the Abrams tanks on his ship and head for Iraq with a rocket launcher on his shoulder. The Americans had certainly descended on us in dizzying numbers to protect the Gulf's oil reserves, as if it was their property that had been usurped. It was hard to stand by when you felt like someone was taking what belonged to you, or at least what was intended for you. We emerged from the ruins of Bastakia and made our way to a Tex-Mex restaurant called Pancho Villa's, which served the usual variety of tacos, burritos, and chimichangas, prepared by Indian cooks with ingredients sourced from places like Brazil and Denmark, and if we were lucky, avocados from Kenya. It was quite authentic, we professed to the boys. How would you know, they countered, and we agreed they had a point. We seated ourselves and ordered beers. It was early and there was no one on the dance floor yet. Colorful paintings of cacti and maracas hung on the walls. The restaurant's greeter was a 4-foot-tall man who, in keeping with the theme, supported an embroidered black bolero jacket, white ruffled shirt, and straw sombrero with a bright purple rim. He was dark-skinned from Eastern India and had a generous mustache. Everyone called him Pancho. By the end of the night, some plastered patron would think it hilarious to pick him up and toss him around and call him their little piñata. Pancho was quite good-humored about it, but the Americans didn't seem to know how to react to him and his wide grin as he approached our table to say hello. It didn't look like they found him as delightful as the rest of us did. Thank you.
That's wonderful. I think we might have questions either from the audience or our virtual audience. So anyone feel free. Matt. Hi.
Hi. Yeah, there was talk, kind of really very little talk. The Sheikh Maktoum, that was his plan. He had the plans, but no one could ever believe it. No one would believe it. They would never believe it. We had just opened a golf course, which was already surprising to have a green golf course in the middle of the desert at that time. But no one would ever think that what Dubai is today, they would never believe it. There was a little bit of talk, and then of course, when it started up, it all came to a halt with the financial crisis, and then it started back up again. But yes, there was not even, if you told me then, I would have said you were crazy. Absolutely. Yeah, I couldn't believe it. Yeah. I have briefly a few years ago, and yes, I'm just amazed. It's like, I don't know. I think people have money they like to build. Like San Francisco, we had this iconic skyline all these years, and then the Salesforce Tower guy came in and he built this tall tower, changed the skyline. It seems like as human beings, we like to build things, whether it's pyramids or skyscrapers. So, it's just amazing what they're doing there. I just hope that, and I know this won't be true, that all this building, they do it, since they know from our mistakes, they've learned lessons, that they do it in a environmentally friendly or sustainable way, or I don't think it's going to happen, but they have the chance to kind of leapfrog. They have the resources and the knowledge now to do it in a better way than the rest of the world did. So I hope they do that. Yeah. Yeah. Sure. Absolutely.
Tania had asked about books that were modeling this after. I was curious about books about novels about Dubai and the UAE. I mean, the schools, the dog.
Yes.
I'm wondering, what other books you've come across. And the dog is a very different thing.
Yeah. Yes. I mean, yeah, exactly. The dog is fish out of water, kind of a white male comes in. There's Dubai, not that many. There is a short story writer, and it was called Temporary People, and that is more like that is kind of based in Dubai and the UAE. But otherwise, not many actually set in Dubai. There's some set in like Kuwait and other countries, Saudi, but not that many set in Dubai. And that was part of it. I was like, no one knows the Dubai that I know. And that kind of came from that as well. But otherwise, there's some great, like The Unlasting Home by Maya Al-Nakib is a really beautiful book. And if you want to read something fun, it's called The Girls of Riyadh. It's like Gossip Girl for the Saudi girls, you know. So yeah, yeah. So that's a fun book to read. Yeah. Um, Dubai doesn't have that many. Yeah, nothing really based in the Middle East as such. There was Three Kings a long time ago, the George Clooney movie, where it was kind of this. And then I think there was Jarhead, but that was more about yeah. But nothing really kind of based in this kind of world. Absolutely, yeah. It always had something to do with something more serious. Yeah, yeah. Uh-huh. You know, well, yeah, exactly. Below Deck is very much. I love that show. Below Deck, Vanderpump Rules, and I actually do watch. I do a lot of writing with reality TV playing in the background. That's instead of music, I have Bravo reality TV playing.
Maybe I should try that.
It's just so much delicious drama. It's like amazing. You can't even write this stuff, you know.
Is that like you're getting something from the tone?
It's like it's not non-investment viewing. You're not invested in it, so you don't want to watch it all the time. You can go away, you can concentrate on something else, and you can come back and watch it. But yeah, Below Deck, if you see that, exactly, you've seen how the guests behave, you've seen kind of the camaraderie and the conflict between the people who work on people on the work on this, and so that's definitely a parallel for this. Yeah, yeah. Yes. Yeah. Right. Yeah, I mean, I think because a lot of these young guest workers were in their 20s, and so it just so happened that's the age. But what a fun age to explore. It was the kind of time where you had no money, but then everyone wanted to go out for a drink in the evening, and you'd still like, okay, yeah, I'll go out for a drink, And it's kind of that, like I said, you have that unfounded sense of invincibility, but also they you're at that age where that self-doubts and all these fears have not abated yet when you've left home, but yet you're in this strange situation that you find you're meant to be an adult, and yet you're not really an adult. You have so much living to do ahead of you, and you think there's a future owed to you in many ways. And so it was just such an interesting age to explore. And on top of that, like, these characters now find them, their future is uncertain because they don't know where they're going to go after their time here is up, and then their present becomes uncertain because of the war. And so that's what I thought. It was just a very interesting age to explore. Yeah.
Yeah, it's part of what makes it fun, because the
Yeah.
nights have this feeling of anything could happen, and they never seem to end. They always have somewhere else to go.
Yeah.
And I also like, it's really cool to read a novel about work, like the workplace.
Yeah.
Like, and it's hard to make a workplace novel feel as fun as this. I mean, were you thinking of do you enjoy novels about work, or?
Not always. I have read novels about work, like Joshua Ferris. Then we came to the end. That's a very funny kind of workplace novel. But in this case, it's like, because they were in their 20s and they were away from home. This was the only people they have. That was their family. Even if they didn't like them, that's who they were hanging out with after work. And they all lived in small little apartments that they didn't want to go back to. And so there was that sense of we just don't want this day to end. And so yeah, exactly, yeah, it was that kind of feeling of being in your 20s and just not wanting the day to end. And to hang out with your friends all the time. Yeah. I went to boarding school and I grew up with my friends, basically. So since I've been 10 years old, it's been my friends. Yeah. So, yeah. Oh, yes. Yeah. Yeah. I haven't heard from any of them. I am in touch with some of them. I haven't heard, they're all over the world. And I think the only reason they know, I didn't tell any of them I'm writing it. I think the only reason they learned about it is when they saw they saw it on Instagram or Facebook, and they were like, wait a minute. Yeah. So I'm curious to see what they think of it. They actually I was working for two different tour operators, and kind of the first one was really the rinky-dink little small one that I was working for. Then I moved on. I was working for Emirates for a while, and they were very big and they were very corporate. Yeah. So, but yeah, I haven't. I'll be curious to see what. I'm kind of curious, but my eyes are closed to say, like, I'm not sure. I hope I've done justice to it. Yeah, at the end. Yeah. 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 I know. Yeah. You take liberties. You look at situations and you say, what's the potential of the situation? Someone asked me, is that first scene true? And there's a scene where a sheikh is left on a plane. And I said, well, I mean, we saved him. We got him off the plane in time, but that doesn't happen to Ria. Yeah. Yeah. In real life, we did get him off in time. Yeah.
I mean, I loved the scene you read because I forget that there's so many peripheral characters that are just so vivid in a very short time. And I'm curious about your approach to these. How do you think about these different side characters?
Yeah, I don't know who it was. Is it Michael Chabon or Andrew Sean Greer? Both Bay Area writers. So I get, they said every side character is the protagonist of their own story. So yeah. So I definitely like to keep that in mind because they come with their own backstory, their own kind of wants and needs and longings. And I think a place is interesting. A place offers context to characters, but a place doesn't have longings and wants and motivations and momentum and that kind of thing. And so I love working with these characters. And this place kind of had these, because you're coming from not only different backgrounds, but different countries. So it's just such a rich type kind of character studies to explore. Yeah. So how are we doing it? Okay. Oh, sure. Yeah. Well, I found that people had a lot of presumptions and assumptions about Dubai. When I first moved to the US, and I'd say I lived in Dubai, and they would kind of not know where it is at all. And then of course with the terrorists coming through there for 9/11, some of them they flew through Dubai, and also because of then all the building and these stories of this world tallest building, Black Diamond ski slope in the middle of the desert. They kind of think of Dubai as this place of like these construction projects that defy the laws of nature. So I really thought, that, but like I said, that was not the Dubai I knew. And so I really wanted to upend those presumptions that they already had. And also, I think a lot of people think it's, since it's a Muslim country, it's conservative like Saudi Arabia. But Dubai is very open. You can wear shorts, you can wear tank tops, you can drink in most places which are licensed. And so I really wanted to show that it's just not, you can't paint with the same paintbrush. You can't paint the whole region. It's just so different and varied. And I really wanted to, shine a light on that. Yeah.
I feel like one of the challenges too is trying to bring certain readers up to speed about Dubai, and you're almost having to be, or Ria's voice is almost like a tour guide for us.
Yes.
And so I was wondering about that, that the difficulties of that, or like the pleasures of that. Like, how did you kind of balance the amount of information and context you're going to get?
Yeah, definitely. I had that idea that she's going to be your tour guide through this place, because when you read it, I want you to be as if you're walking with her and meeting her friends and sitting in the cafes and restaurants and going to work with her. But I love science fiction and fantasy, and I really love their world building. And I kind of approached it like that. I was like, world, you go with this character. There's a character that introduces you to the world in fantasy novels. And then there are certain challenges and certain restrictions that are particular to that world that the character has to face. And in Dubai, it's, sex, premarital sex, sorry, alcohol, immigration, all that. So they're just kind of like these certain challenges that are specific to the place. But you always have this character who will take you around, explain kind of through them, you'll learn about the politics and the economics and the flora and the fauna and the seasons and, and the people and the place. And so definitely I borrowed a lot from fantasy in world building in that regard when I was writing this.
That's so interesting. I mean, it's to me like the reading experience is just this perfect combination of entertainment and learning. And it could have felt like sort of heavy-handed, but I think it's her voice that's sort of, you're just willing to follow her anywhere she goes.
And it is a little bit of a mush of genres, like there's a little bit of thriller aspect, and all that, which made it a hard sell to people, really. Yeah, but I think I really, that's what I wanted. I mean, Dubai was a place of characters. Like, there was not many hard and fast rules there at that time. Everything could come through Dubai as long as it didn't stay. So we had like arms dealers there, and like Victor Boat, who was just exchanged for Brittany Griner. He was based there. He had small planes and he would fly goods all over the world. And he had a base in Sharjah. So it was just filled with these amazing characters. And as a tour operator, I mean, I was there. We were young and we were always invited to parties. We were young women, we were making the place look pretty, and we were invited to all these parties. And talk about true. There was this house we used to go to quite often, and he had this palatial mansion. And towards the end of I had gone there a few times, and towards the end of my time, I was some of my friends were not there, and this guy said, "I'm going to come with me. We're going to this house." And I was like 2 o'clock in the morning, and I said, "What does he do?" And he said, "He's an arms dealer." I'm like, "You mean I've been coming to this house all this time?" Yeah. So it was just these people. It was just this little city that had all this, these weird characters populated by these, characters. So yeah. So I won't say what whose name. I'll say I was too drunk to remember his name.
Hopefully he won't read this.
Yeah, no. Yeah. All right.
Well, thank you so much.
Thank
this
you.
is such a
Thank you
wonderful,
all for coming.
fun
And
novel.
thank you so much.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much. And I have I've got this is like a vintage travel poster, the cover, and so I have postcards that are ready and made in this with this when the books come out. And please help yourself to as many as you want. They're stamped and ready to go. Send them to someone you want to go on vacation with, or or you want to read this book with. Yeah. So. Yeah. Oh.
Thank you.
Oh, thank you. Yeah. Thank you so much. Yeah. This is lovely. Thank you.
We'll make space for a signing line. You can buy books upstairs. You can do book sign, and we will wrap it up. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks so much.
And